On my 18th birthday, Valerie Reed took me to a steakhouse in the shopping plaza by the highway. Valerie sat across from me in her tailored crimson dress, maintaining a glossy smile as if performing for an audience. Beside her, Peter stared intensely at his untouched water, utterly silent, refusing to meet my eyes. I am Jillian. As of today, I am exactly 18. We need to have a practical conversation, Jillian, Valerie said, her voice deliberate. You must know we only kept you around this long because of Elaine's trust fund. The money stopped this morning. Elaine. She preferred the phrase late mother to dead mother, and now she didn't even bother with a title. The house locks were changed this afternoon, Peter muttered, his voice barely a whisper. They expected a reaction. They wanted me to shatter, to make a scene in a crowded suburban restaurant. But I didn't shed a tear or even push my chair back. I took a slow sip of water and smiled. I see, I replied, my voice terrifyingly steady. It's funny you mention my mother's money. I actually found her original lawyer. Valerie's perfect smile faltered. What? And the best part, I leaned forward, is he's sitting in the booth right behind you. If your family thinks they can use wealth to control your life, wait until they realize you hold the real power. Keep listening to hear how the tables finally turn. 6 months before that dinner, I was standing inside a storage unit Valerie wanted emptied by the weekend. The space smelled of dust. Valerie had ordered me to clear the entire unit immediately since Chelsea was redecorating her bedroom. Chelsea desperately needed a climate-controlled area for her incoming custom-made furniture. Valerie always ensured Chelsea's belongings were treated with absolute reverence. She insisted on reserving the most pristine spots for Chelsea's oversized decorative boxes, expensive party dresses, and endless shopping bags. Meanwhile, the few remaining possessions of my mother, Elaine, had been carelessly shoved into a dark corner near a leaking pipe. They were treated like worthless junk someone forgot to throw out. Dragging broken patio chairs toward the door, I noticed a battered cardboard box wedged tightly behind them. It was sealed with peeling tape and had the name Porter scrawled across the side in black marker. That was my mother's maiden name. My chest instantly tightened. Peter had repeatedly assured me for years that all of Elaine's personal items were lost during our last house move. He swore the moving company misplaced her boxes and claimed he spent months tracking them down. Staring at the handwriting now, I realized my father had looked me right in the eye and lied. I knelt on the cold floor, ignoring the grime soaking into my jeans, and carefully peeled back the dry tape. The musty scent of dried lavender drifted up from the carton. On top lay a neatly folded emerald silk shawl, the exact one my mother used to wear on chilly winter evenings. Beneath the soft fabric rested a heavy, locked small metal box. Next to it sat a loose brass key, its shape clearly belonging to a safe deposit box, and an old, faded business card bearing the name Martha Keene, attorney at law. Resting at the very bottom was a sealed white envelope. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached down and picked it up. Written across the front in elegant cursive were the words, "For Jillian when she turns 18." I traced the ink letters with my thumb, my pulse racing. The urge to tear the paper open and devour the contents right there under the fluorescent bulb was overwhelming. But I forced myself to freeze. I couldn't risk opening the metal box or tearing the envelope right now. If I left ripped paper or disturbed the remaining contents, Valerie would undoubtedly inspect the unit later and notice something was tampered with. She was notoriously meticulous about checking my chores. Right on cue, my cell phone vibrated violently in my back pocket. Valerie's name flashed on the screen. I answered, and her sharp, impatient voice instantly filled my ear. She demanded to know why I was taking so long and sharply reminded me that Chelsea's delivery trucks were arriving first thing tomorrow morning. I kept my tone perfectly flat, assuring her I was bagging the last of the trash. I hung up the phone without waiting for her reply. Working quickly, I slipped the sealed envelope and the attorney's business card deep into the inner pocket of my denim jacket. I carefully arranged the emerald silk shawl back over the locked metal box and the brass key, folding the cardboard flaps exactly as I had found them. Finally, I pushed the Porter box deep into the shadows behind a stack of discarded picture frames so Valerie wouldn't spot it. As I carried the heavy trash bags out to the dumpster, I felt the crisp edge of the envelope pressing against my chest. Staring out at the empty asphalt, I understood with absolute certainty that the hidden letter wasn't just a nostalgic keepsake, it was a deliberate instruction. The next afternoon, April Lawson drove me to a brick office building 2 towns over. April was my oldest friend, but she didn't try to solve the massive problem sitting on my shoulders. She simply played the role of silent emotional support. During the ride, she kept her eyes on the road, occasionally reminding me to take steady breaths. Once parked, April stayed in the driver's seat, promising to wait as long as it took. I walked through the double doors alone and approached the receptionist. I was immediately escorted down a quiet hallway to meet Martha Keene. Martha was Elaine Porter's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman radiating professional efficiency. The moment I introduced myself, recognition flashed across her face. She ushered me into her private office and gestured toward a chair. I pulled the faded business card from my pocket and placed it on her desk. Martha nodded slowly and confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Before passing away, my mother established a substantial trust fund designed to protect my future. However, Martha clarified that this fund was not a blank check for Peter and Valerie to spend however they pleased. Because I was a minor, Peter had been appointed as the legal financial custodian. He was only permitted to withdraw highly specific amounts, and those funds had to be used strictly for my direct medical care, essential living expenses, or educational needs. Every single dollar was supposed to be dedicated entirely to my personal well-being. Leaning forward, Martha asked a series of pointed questions. She asked if I had noticed any significant, unexplained luxury purchases made by my family recently. Her voice remained perfectly neutral as she inquired about Chelsea's brand new sports car, the lavish tropical family vacation they took last winter without me, the sudden kitchen renovation Valerie endlessly bragged about, or expensive private tuition fees. Hearing those exact items listed, the puzzle pieces violently clicked into place. I began to fully understand my mother's money had likely been drained to fund their extravagant lifestyle. Martha then brought up Celeste Porter, my biological aunt. She revealed that Celeste had been trying to monitor my well-being from afar. A sharp memory suddenly hit me. I clearly recalled seeing Celeste's return address printed on colorful envelopes in our mail pile occasionally, but those letters magically disappeared before I could ever hold or read them. Peter had obviously intercepted every single one to keep me isolated. Despite the heavy implications, Martha didn't make any dramatic promises or declare anyone legally guilty just yet. She maintained a highly pragmatic approach, stating clearly we couldn't take any formal action without hard evidence. She needed actual bank statements, transaction records, and document copies. Before concluding our meeting, Martha handed me a notepad containing a strict to-do list. First, I was forbidden from signing any paperwork Peter handed me. Second, I needed to secretly photograph or copy any financial documents left unattended around the house. Third, I had to immediately open a private bank account in my own name. Finally, she advised me to secure a safe place to stay, in case they tried to kick me out early. I folded the paper, thanked her sincerely, and walked back out to the parking lot. April was right where I left her, the engine idling quietly. I climbed into the passenger seat and buckled my seatbelt. April didn't demand a play-by-play of the meeting or offer any empty platitudes. She put the car in drive and steered us toward the highway. I rested my head against the cool window pane, staring at the passing trees. There were no dramatic tears or breakdowns on the ride home. Instead, my mind felt incredibly clear, focused entirely on executing the concrete tasks ahead. 2 weeks before my birthday, Valerie suddenly started acting polite. She abruptly swapped her usual sharp demands for an incredibly unsettling, sugary tone, randomly complimenting my faded outfits and cheerfully offering to make my favorite breakfast. Then, she casually suggested taking me out for a celebratory birthday dinner at a nice upscale steakhouse located in the suburban shopping plaza. She aggressively emphasized it would be a highly intimate small family gathering featuring only Valerie, Peter, and myself, intentionally leaving Chelsea entirely off the guest list to create a false sense of privacy. While Valerie enthusiastically described the expensive appetizer menu, Peter stood silently by the marble kitchen counter, aggressively staring at the floor tiles and cowardly refusing to look directly at me. Watching them awkwardly perform this bizarre domestic theater, I instantly understood this seemingly generous dinner invitation was completely loaded with a hidden, malicious agenda. They were undoubtedly planning a coordinated, inescapable ambush to forcefully secure my legal signature on that highly restrictive contract before I officially turned 18 and gained total independence. I immediately sent a cautious text message to Martha, detailing the upcoming restaurant reservation and my suspicions. Martha swiftly offered to secure her own private table at the exact same steakhouse, promising to remain completely out of sight and absolutely not intervene unless I explicitly gave her the prearranged signal. My biological aunt, Celeste, had also recently been brought up to speed on the dire situation and insisted on attending, agreeing to sit quietly at a separate booth just to provide hidden moral support from a distance. Knowing I finally had reliable backup, I shifted into full preparation mode with extreme focus. Following the lawyer's strict instructions, I successfully opened a brand new, private checking account at a local credit union entirely under my own name, ensuring my parents had zero access. I also packed a small duffel bag with several days' worth of clothes, basic toiletries, and my most cherished keepsakes, silently dropping it off at April's house after school. April simply took the heavy bag and nodded, offering no exhausting emotional questions or long conversations, just pure, practical solidarity. Back in my own bedroom, I meticulously organized a heavy manila folder to bring to the tense dinner. Inside, I securely placed a certified copy of the official trust summary Martha had provided, the blank family expense acknowledgement paper Valerie had previously tried to forcefully impose on me, clear photographs proving Peter had intentionally returned Celeste's intercepted letters, and stark copies of the highly suspicious financial transactions systematically draining my mother's funds. I also carefully tucked away a clean, protected photocopy of Elaine's original letter that I had secretly unearthed months ago. The tension in the house reached an absolutely unbearable peak on Thursday evening. Peter finally spoke to me as I was walking up the creaky stairs, his voice chillingly cold and completely devoid of any parental warmth or affection. "After Friday, this house needs to be peaceful again," he muttered softly, his jaw clenched tight as he stared past my shoulder. Hearing those harsh words, I understood exactly what his twisted definition of peaceful truly meant. A quiet house entirely free of my presence, my questions, and my rightful inheritance. I didn't flinch, cry, or offer any desperate apologies. Instead, I simply walked into my room and securely zipped the manila envelope into my tote bag, taking one deep breath and feeling entirely ready to face whatever they had planned for that steakhouse dinner. Friday evening, the steakhouse was packed with families, office groups, and people pretending not to listen. I arrived at the suburban shopping plaza 20 minutes early, finding my assigned seat in the corner booth. Glancing casually over my shoulder, I spotted Martha sitting discreetly at a table just a few yards away. Beside her sat my biological aunt, Celeste, giving me a silent, encouraging nod, along with a sharply dressed man I recognized as a forensic trust accountant. Knowing my backup was securely in place, I focused my attention back to the entrance. Valerie and Peter arrived exactly on time, slipping into the curved booth opposite me. For the first 20 minutes, Valerie played the role of the exceptionally kind, doting stepmother to absolute perfection. She ordered the most expensive appetizers on the menu, loudly wished me a happy 18th birthday, and repeatedly steered the conversation toward everything they had supposedly done for me over the past decade. She smiled warmly, her tone dripping with manufactured affection. Meanwhile, Peter remained entirely silent. He focused intensely on his untouched glass of ice water and nervously studied the laminated dinner menu, continuing his cowardly streak of avoiding direct eye contact with me. The shift in the atmosphere happened immediately after the waiter cleared our salad plates. Valerie's bright, artificial smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. She folded her hands over the linen tablecloth and smoothly announced that since I was officially a legal adult, the family no longer held any financial or moral responsibilities toward me. Her voice remained steady, slicing through the ambient restaurant noise as she plainly stated that Elaine's trust fund was the only genuine reason they had ever kept me around. Peter finally spoke, his voice barely rising above a pathetic whisper. "We changed the locks this afternoon," he muttered, still staring firmly at his water glass. Valerie didn't miss a beat. She reached into her designer handbag and placed the thick, stapled family expense acknowledgement paper directly onto the table, aggressively sliding a pen toward my hand. She demanded I sign the document immediately to confirm I would never pursue any financial claims against them, framing it as a standard formality for my newfound independence. They clearly expected me to shatter, to burst into tears, or to cause a hysterical scene in the middle of the crowded dining room. I did absolutely none of those things. I kept my breathing slow and my expression perfectly blank. Looking across the table, I addressed my father one final time. "Dad, did you know she was going to say it like that?" I asked softly. Peter visibly stiffened, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his glass, but he didn't utter a single word of denial. His cowardly silence was all the confirmation I needed. Reaching into my tote bag, I pulled out my heavy manila envelope. I looked directly into Valerie's arrogant eyes. "Funny you mentioned that money, because I found my mother's lawyers." Instantly, the fabric of the booth behind them rustled. Martha stood up, her presence commanding immediate authority. She stepped over to our table, introducing herself with chilling professionalism. She didn't make any dramatic arrests or wild accusations. She simply stated that she was the legal counsel representing my sole interests regarding Elaine Porter's established trust. Martha calmly informed them that all attempts to forcefully extract my signature on unofficial documents must cease immediately. The forensic accountant stood up next, adjusting his glasses and firmly confirming that a comprehensive, independent audit of all custodial bank accounts would begin Monday morning. Valerie's perfectly painted face flushed with sudden panic. She desperately attempted to regain control, raising her voice to angrily insist that Martha had absolutely no right to rudely interfere with a private family dinner. I looked around the packed restaurant. Several nearby tables had already stopped eating, their conversations halting as they blatantly tuned in to our escalating confrontation. The heavy public pressure was suffocating, and Valerie clearly hated being exposed. I leaned forward, my voice ringing out clearly. "This stopped being a family dinner the exact moment you changed the locks on the house." As Valerie opened her mouth to argue, the chair behind her scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. Celeste stood up to her full height, stepping out from the shadows of her booth, finally ready to break her long silence. Celeste reached our table with a folded envelope held in both hands. She looked down at my father with absolute contempt, before turning her gentle gaze to me. She introduced herself softly but clearly, stating she was Elaine's younger sister. Her voice trembled with suppressed emotion as she explained how she had tirelessly written letters, made countless phone calls, and mailed birthday gifts every single year. She revealed that every attempt to reach me had been ruthlessly intercepted and blocked by the two people sitting across from me. Peter shifted uncomfortably in his leather seat, his face turning pale under the restaurant lights. He stammered weakly, desperately attempting to justify his cruel actions by claiming he was only trying to protect me from unnecessary emotional confusion. Hearing that pathetic excuse, I felt a sudden, profound shift deep inside my chest. The last lingering thread of childhood attachment tying me to him completely snapped. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice devoid of any former warmth. "You don't get to call that protection, Peter." Celeste offered a sad smile and gently slid the folded envelope across the white linen tablecloth. It was the original letter Elaine had left for me. I carefully broke the old wax seal and unfolded the delicate paper. My mother's elegant handwriting covered the page. I quietly read a short section near the bottom. She wrote that money could never buy genuine love or replace her physical presence, but the trust was specifically designed to ensure I would always have independent choices when I grew up. Elaine desperately wanted me to know, above all else, that I was never abandoned. Suddenly, a familiar, confused voice broke through the tense silence of the dining room. Chelsea had just walked into the steakhouse to meet a group of her college friends, only to unexpectedly stumble upon our public confrontation. Hearing the heated exchange about the secret trust fund, her jaw dropped in absolute shock. She stepped forward, looking directly at her mother, and demanded to know if her brand new car, expensive private tuition, and extravagant trips were actually paid for with my mother's money instead of the family money Valerie always proudly bragged about. Cornered by the public humiliation and her own daughter's devastating accusations, Valerie panicked entirely. She immediately pointed an accusing finger at her husband, loudly blaming Peter for authorizing the massive withdrawals. Peter's cowardly demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by furious, defensive indignation. He fired back, shouting that Valerie was the one who ruthlessly managed the household spending and constantly demanded more luxuries to maintain their fake affluent lifestyle. The two of them began viciously tearing each other apart right there in the dining room, desperately trying to shift the blame. I didn't waste a single breath arguing, seeking empty apologies, or joining their incredibly toxic screaming match. Martha placed a reassuring, professional hand on my shoulder, calmly reminding me that I absolutely didn't need to sign anything they had put in front of me. I stood up from the curved booth, carefully picking up my mother's precious letter and sliding it safely into my tote bag alongside the manila envelope. Valerie abruptly realized I was actually leaving and frantically reached out, trying to grab my wrist to pull me back to the table for damage control. I smoothly pulled my arm completely out of her desperate reach before she could make contact. I looked down at the two pathetic people who had stolen my childhood and shamelessly squandered my mother's legacy. "Anything you need to say to me goes through Ms. Keene," I stated clearly, my voice carrying zero emotion or hesitation. Without waiting for their frantic, inevitable responses, I finally turned my back on them. I walked out of the crowded steakhouse flanked by Martha and Celeste, leaving the chaotic, ruined wreckage of that family entirely behind me forever. By Monday morning, everything Peter and Valerie wanted to keep private was in writing. Martha swiftly sent a strict, formal no-contact letter, legally demanding that all future communications go directly through her downtown law office. My mother's established trust fund was instantly and permanently locked away from their greedy reach. The forensic accountant immediately began thoroughly reviewing years of deeply hidden financial records. A massive, highly detailed demand letter arrived at their doorstep, legally requiring Peter to provide actual receipts, verified bank statements, and written explanations for Chelsea's brand new car, the extravagant kitchen remodel, their luxury resort vacations, private college tuition, and expensive designer furniture. They weren't dramatically arrested or instantly thrown out onto the streets, but their carefully curated lives quickly crumbled under the heavy weight of their own deceit. Facing a looming, highly expensive civil lawsuit and strict legal demands for massive financial repayment, they completely lost all rights to manage my remaining assets. Valerie humiliatingly lost her prestigious, beloved position on the local school charity board after the embarrassing story rapidly spread among the wealthy neighborhood parents. Meanwhile, Peter faced a serious, incredibly stressful internal review at his corporate job regarding his gross lack of personal and financial ethics. Even Chelsea quickly packed her bags and permanently moved in with her biological father across the state, completely refusing to ever defend Valerie's indefensible actions anymore. I never once went back to that toxic, suffocating house. Instead, I confidently signed a lease for a small, incredibly quiet studio apartment located right near my college campus. I used the recovered trust fund exactly as Elaine originally intended, strictly paying for my university tuition, responsibly covering my monthly rent, and steadily building a secure savings account for my future. I absolutely refuse to waste a single dime or a single second of my precious time seeking any form of petty revenge against them. Peter occasionally left pathetic, weeping voicemails on my cell phone, desperately begging to just sit down, talk, and heal our fractured relationship. But I never once answered his manipulative calls. Valerie sent one furious, venomous email attempting to blame me for completely ruining their perfect lives, which Martha swiftly intercepted and handled with cold legal precision. I simply sat in my peaceful, brightly lit apartment, keeping Elaine's original letter safely framed on my wooden desk as a daily reminder of her enduring, unconditional love. This entire grueling experience taught me a truly vital lesson. A real family should never use a protective roof over your head or basic financial support as a heavy, manipulative chain to control you. Choosing to cut contact completely isn't born out of bitter hatred or spite. Sometimes, walking away without looking back is simply the absolute only way to keep yourself safe and permanently preserve your mental sanity. Thank you so much for listening to my personal story until the very end. I would genuinely love to hear your own opinions down in the comments section below. What are your honest thoughts on setting strict, healthy boundaries when it comes to money and toxic family dynamics?